March 28, 1837, The Gleaner, Northumberland, Kent, and Gloucester, Shediasma. From Curiosities of Medical Experience. Truth severe, in fairy fiction, dressed. There is an Eastern story of a certain prince who had received from a fairy the faculty of not only assuming whatever appearance he thought proper, but of discerning the wandering spirits of the departed. He had long labored under a painful chronic disease that none of the court physicians, ordinary or extraordinary, could relieve, and he resolved to wander about the streets of his capital until he could find someone, regular or irregular, who could alleviate his sufferings. For this purpose, he donned the garb and appearance of a dervish. As he was passing through one of the principal streets, he was surprised to see it so thronged with ghosts that, had they still been inhabitants of their former earthly tenements, they must have obstructed the thoroughfare. But what was his amazement and dismay when he saw they were all grouped with anxious looks round the door of his royal father's physician, haunting, no doubt, the man to whom they attributed their untimely doom. Shocked with the sight, he hurried to another part of the city, where resided another physician of the court, holding the second rank in fashionable estimation. Alas, his gateway was also surrounded with reproachful departed patients. Thunderstruck at such a discovery, and returning thanks to the prophet that he was still in being, despite the practice of these great men, he resolved to submit all the other renowned practitioners to a similar visit, and he was grieved to find that the scale of ghosts kept pace with the scale of their medical rank. Heartbroken and despairing of a cure, he was slowly sauntering back to the palace when, in an obscure street, and on the door of a humble dwelling, he read a doctor's name. One single, poor, solitary ghost, leaning his despondent cheek upon his fleshless hand, was seated on the doctor's steps. "Alas," exclaimed the prince, "it is then too true that humble merit withers in the shade, while ostentatious ignorance inhabits golden mansions." This poor, neglected doctor, who has but one unlucky case to lament, is then the only man in whom I can place confidence. He rapped. The door was opened by the doctor himself, a venerable old man, not rich enough, perhaps, to keep a domestic to answer his infrequent call. His white locks and flowing beard added to the confidence which his situation had inspired. The elated youth then related at full length all his complicated ailments, and the still more complicated treatment to which he had in vain been submitted. The sapient physician was not illiberal enough to say that the prince's attendants had all been in error, since all mankind may err, but his sarcastic smile, the curl of his lips, and the dubious shake of his hairy head most eloquently told the anxious patient that he considered his former physicians ignorant, murderous set of upstarts, only fit to depopulate a community. With a triumphant look, he promised a cure and gave the ailant a much-valued prescription, which he carefully confided to his bosom, after which he expressed his gratitude by pouring upon the doctor's table a purse of golden sequins, which made the old man's blinking eyes shine as bright as the coin he beheld with wondrous delight. His joy gave suppleness to his rigid spine, and, after bowing the prince out in the most obsequious manner, he ventured to ask him one humble question. By what good luck, by what kind planet had he been recommended to seek his advice? The prince naturally asked for the reason of so strange a question, to which the worthy doctor replied, with eyes brimful with tears of gratitude, "O sir, because I considered myself the most unfortunate man in Baghdad, until this happy moment, for I have been in this noble and wealthy city for these last 15 years, and have only obtained one single patient." "Ah," cried the prince in despair, "then it must be that poor, solitary, unhappy-looking ghost that is now sitting on your steps." June 17, 1908, The Evening News, San Jose, California. Killed himself to escape spirit of his dead wife. Woman killed herself after being deserted. Man declares he had nightly visit from ghost. Logansport, Indiana, June 17. According to the mother of Mendes Grace, the man that committed suicide yesterday by taking strychnine, he sought death to escape the spirit of his dead wife, who killed herself a year ago, after Grace had deserted her for another woman. Mrs. John Helms, a neighbor, states that Grace told her 3 months ago that he was continually haunted by his dead wife and that he was going to commit suicide. 2 weeks ago, he complained to Mrs. Helms of nightly visits by his wife and reiterated his threat of self-destruction. Grace returned here from a lumber camp in Mississippi 3 weeks ago, stating that the spirit of his dead wife nightly came to him and disturbed his slumbers. He came back hoping that she would let him alone, but instead, she followed him and kept up her nocturnal visits. He told Mrs. Helms that the strain on him was so great that his nerves were shattered, and that death was his only surcease. While Grace was in Martinsville taking the baths for rheumatism a year ago, he met a woman who was also a patient. He remained longer at the institution than he had intended, and when he came home, according to the story told, he told Mrs. Grace that the woman was in love with him and that he was going to Lafayette with her. The wife anxiously awaited his return. Days passed and he did not come. The wife wrote letters to Lafayette, visited every train that arrived from the city, and, at last, convinced that he had deserted her, she swallowed poison and died with an appeal on her lips for his return. Grace's father was much incensed at his actions, and he went to Lafayette, where he found that his son and a woman had bought tickets for a town in Texas. He wired the authorities there to arrest the couple, but the pair dropped off at some point in Mississippi. Grace went to work in a lumber camp, and his companion accepted a position as camp cook. Last Christmas, Grace's mother went to Mississippi, but she did not like the place, and came home in February. Grace followed some time later. It was then that he told Mrs. Helms that he was continually haunted by the spirit of his dead wife. According to her story, almost nightly he was awakened by a cold hand placed upon his cheek or forehead, and that when he looked up he saw the form of the dead woman standing at his bedside. She had a sad, sweet smile on her face, and seemed to beckon him on. Often he tried to take the form in his arms, but he only clutched empty air. It was gone. He told Mrs. Helms that even in the daytime, he always felt the presence of his wife. He returned to the Mississippi lumber camp after a short visit, but 2 weeks ago he came back. He then told his mother and Mrs. Helms that he could stand it no longer, down in that lonely country, that his wife nightly appeared to him, and he feared that if he did not come away, he would lose his reason. He hoped that a change would do him good, and that his wife's spirit would now leave him alone. But it did not. Nightly he was visited here. There was no peace for him either day or night. At night his dead wife appeared in his dreams and awakened him with the touch of a cold hand, and in the daytime she always made her presence felt. He took to drinking to get away from the haunting spirit, but it availed little. It was an open secret among neighbors and friends that Grace had the hallucination of being haunted by his dead wife, and it is a known fact that he was almost distracted and that he threatened to kill himself. It is said that finding that he could not escape her, he killed himself, so that he could be with her in spirit and, if possible, make amends for the wrong which he had done her.